Well, welcome to our discussion on harnessing digital connectivity through advanced telecommunications. In an increasingly connected world, telecom and digital transformation connectivity is at the core of transforming all other industries. India is seeing a pretty dramatic change, stupendous growth in mobile subscribers. We now have over 900 million internet users in India. A few years ago, this was unfathomable. This has led to a pretty dramatic change in all areas, in education, in fintech, and financial services. India's digital public infrastructure has been lauded the world over. Just to share a sense of scale of what has transpired, last month alone, India's UPI transactions crossed 15 billion in a single month. This is leading to hundreds of startups every year getting funded in India, driving change and innovation, building new companies in new industries. At this juncture, we have a new huge super cycle, an AI super cycle, where devices are becoming more intelligent. These 900 million connected devices are now going to become smarter in the age of AI. And what that means is, in spite of India's stupendous success at building the world's most advanced telecommunications infrastructure, we are now entering a cycle where for the next decade, tons more data center infrastructure, GPU clusters, and so on will have to be built. So the timing for today's discussion could not be more appropriate. We are super honored today to have a very special guest with us and several members of the board of USISPF. Since I was talking about AI, I requested ChatGPT to help me introduce Honorable Minister, and it gave me a pretty nice summary of his. So I'm very honored to welcome Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia to the panel discussion. Here's what ChatGPT said. It says, Jyotiraditya Scindia is a prominent Indian politician and member of the Bharatiya Janata Party, currently serving as Minister of Communications and Development of the Northeastern region. Born into the royal family of Gwalior, he has a rich legacy and deep commitment to public service and has been a 6-term member of parliament. With a background in economics from Harvard University, he also went to GSB at Stanford. Scindia brings a blend of traditional values and modern insights to his role. Since entering politics, he has been a vocal advocate for infrastructure development and modernization, playing a crucial role in enhancing India's aviation sector. His dynamic leadership and innovative approach continue to drive progress and connectivity across the nation. I'm sure Minister Scindia will talk to us about his 100-day plan and share insights how India might transform in the future. Let me hand over to Nick from Brunswick Group to moderate the panel discussion.
You shouldn't be thanking him. You should thank ChatGPT.
So, it's, I asked Shailendra, why don't you have ChatGPT do my intro? And he said, even ChatGPT can't do that. So I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. But Mr. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you, Alex and Sachin, for this panel. I have to do my best Shireen Pan over here and try to make this a very lively discussion. And I haven't seen the minister in 37 years. And it's even back then, you could tell he was headed for really disrupting and changing things, and it's been an absolute privilege to watch what you have been doing in your career over here, and ChatGPT doesn't even scratch the surface. But tell us, if you don't mind, just start a little bit with when you think about digital infrastructure and supply chains, what do you see, or what have you seen as the most critical areas of cooperation between the US and India? And I know you mentioned just outside around products as well. So touch on that a little bit too.
So thank you, Nikhil. First of all, it's a pleasure to be back at USISPF. Mukesh has done a yeoman's job of leading this group and pushing for deeper engagement between the US and India, which I believe have great commonalities. Not only the cliched phrases that we hear of the largest democracy and the oldest democracy, but I believe that we both believe in freedoms, we both believe in innovations, we both believe in not incremental change, but we believe in monumental change, and we believe in doing things that will benefit the world. So I think that sets the tone for this strategic partnership forum, to really contribute to the well-being of not only both nations, but to the globe in general. Moving gears now to telecom. It's been a, to use Nikhil's word, a very disruptive, innovative, not decade, but I'd use the term decade in India. There's been a complete sea transformation. And let me just paint the picture out there. We had close to about 800 million mobile subscribers a decade ago. Today we have over 1.16 billion mobile subscribers in this country. If you look at internet penetration, we had 250 million internet connections in this country. We have 950 million internet connections. If you look at broadband, which is greater than 2 GB, we had just about 60 million broadband connections in India 10 years ago. Today we have 940 million broadband connections in India. On the other hand, if you look at the cost structure, the cost of a voice call was 50 paise 10 years ago. It's today 3 paise. So there's been a 96% drop in costs on voice. If you look at the cost of 1 GB of data, it was 289 rupees 10 years ago, which is roughly, what, $3.50, roughly. It's today 12 cents. And so therefore, you've seen exponential penetration, exponential adoption. What does that mean? That means that Prime Minister always said, don't build towers. Build quality of service. Do not look at only supplying service to people. Become a product nation. Do not think of telecom as an end product. Think of it as a means to supplying service. And therefore you've seen an explosion of serviceability to 1.4 billion people in this country. And what do I mean by that? 510 million people who were not connected to the banking environment have been given bank accounts in this country in the last 10 years. Transfer of money directly into people's hands, the concept of UPI, a United Payment Interface. As Shailendra and Nikhil said, in the month of August, we did a transaction of 1 month of $275 billion in a month, 15 billion transactions in India. Now that's the scale, exponential scale that we are talking about. We've had the fastest 5G rollout in the world, 22 months rolled out 5G across 98% of India's districts, covering 80% of our population, 450,000 BTSs. In a period of 22 months. You look at product, we are creating our own 4G stack. Prime Minister is very clear that the government company is not going to use anyone else's equipment. If you're going to roll out 4G services, it's got to be your own 4G stack. And in 19 months, look at the union that Prime Minister was able to create. Government company, CDOT. Private company, Tejas Networks, part of the Tata enterprise. SI, System Integrator, TCS. All three together, we now have a core and a RAN, radio access network, that's fully functional. We've rolled out, we've got a plan of 100,000 sites by April, May of next year. We've rolled out 38,300 sites as of yesterday. So we're going to roll out our own 4G network, which is going to switch to 5G. By June of 25. We'll be the 6th country in the world to be able to do that. Now, those are the exponential growth that India has experienced. Now comes the intersection with the US. We already have a joint working group in the METI ministry that's working together on common platforms. The Prime Minister of India and your President, together in May of 2022, inaugurated the ISET, which is the strategic group on communications, looking at major issues. Just this January 2024, the Open RAN Development Alliance was put together between our Department of Telecom and NSA and the US. So I think we are pushing forward on all engines. I was just telling John outside this room that the Prime Minister's visit to the US has been a landmark visit. For the first time, we've come to an agreement where we're going to put a fab in place in India which will supply chips to defense in the US. It's going to have huge ramifications for India as well as the US going forward. The Quad the QSD has been put in place, the Quad Security and Technology Dialogue, which is going to look at the area of telecom. So I think India and the US both are moving on not a footing, but multiple footings to make sure that we go beyond the technology curve as we grow to greater adoption.
So, Mr. Minister, I love the phrase, the decade. It's fantastic, and I'm glad you brought up the financial services industry, because as somebody who left and comes back frequently, that's the one part which is so tangible, so easy to see. When you look ahead, put on your crystal ball a bit, where do you see that next phase as it relates to telecom? What are the areas you feel most excited about now that you have a population that is banked, now that you have a population with so much connectivity?
So I see a huge amount of entrepreneurism. So let me back up a couple of decades. And the biggest problem in the world to innovation was what? It was the access to capital. Capital was controlled in a few hands 50, 60 years ago. Today, capital is fungible. Capital has become a commodity. It's ideas that are the real capital in the world today. And I think what telecom does is that telecom disintermediates the intermediary and provides power and access to ideas to every single person. And so you're going to see a lot of entrepreneurism grow in India around multiple ideas. Our startup fund, today we have close to about 140,000 government-funded startups in India. India had no unicorn 10 years ago. You've got over 100 unicorns in India today. And I think you're going to see much more of that happen. With 5G coming in, the government has put in place many novel ideas. We're looking at 5G intelligent villages. We've selected 10 to 12 villages where we're going to put 5G into motion, because the key imperative for us is to close, not to bridge, but to close and make that digital divide extinct. And therefore, those applications are going to happen in the areas of agriculture, in the areas of health, in the areas of education. And let me give you an example. We've got a telemedicine portal called eSanjeevani. Over the last 4 to 5 years, we've treated 285 million patients across the length and breadth of India from 127,000 primary care health centers and secondary health care centers. So that is the power of the digital system that's going to yield both in two ways. One, for the government to give service directly to people, and second, for people through access to information to become employers as opposed to employees.
It's such a great answer. I'd love, Alex, if I bring you into the conversation. I think one of the things when you study history, and John, you're familiar with this, and my friend Walter Isaacson, who wrote the books on Steve Jobs and Leonardo da Vinci and Elon Musk, talks about ecosystems and how in different cities in the world, whether it was in Italy, in Milan, or whether it's in the Bay Area, or whether it's, as we've seen in India and Bangalore and Hyderabad, you create ecosystems. Alex, you were talking a little bit about the ecosystem Qualcomm is creating over here, which a lot of people don't recognize. in some ways. Tell us a little bit about that and how you're building that out, because I think that ties into building out what the minister's talking about in terms of 5G as well.
Great. Thanks for the question, Nick, and Minister, great remarks. Thanks for that. So when people ask, what does Qualcomm do? The typical answer is, well, Qualcomm is a semiconductor company, mostly in the mobile space. But if you really want to understand Qualcomm and the way it has operated for decades, is Qualcomm is an ecosystem company. Because at the layer at which we provide technology, unless we're building ecosystems and unless there are partners who can succeed based on our technology, we will fail. So first and foremost, we always think about how do we develop an ecosystem where other companies, other partners, other innovators can succeed. So that's critically important. And when you think about what we do in telecom, what we do is we first engage in R&D at a very fundamental level so that we can bring to industry, global industry, technology to be put in the standards. So we basically say we're in the G business. 3G, 4G, 5G. We develop technology that will go into standards. And then we help industry understand if you adopt this technology, we will be able to succeed in mobile communications. And then we develop semiconductors that will help bring the technology through, okay, to instantiation in mobile devices. But more than that, we go around the world for every G, and we talk to operators around the world. We help them understand the technology. For example, if the operators in the US were to be asked, listen, how does this really work? The answer is, well, you should go talk to Qualcomm. They'll help you understand how this really works. So we go to the operators and we help them understand how to essentially pull the technology through into their networks. And so for us, in order to continue to iterate on that, we have these cycles that we're constantly having to go through. We've done it for decades. On top of that, okay, in addition to selling product, in addition to selling, creating standards and trying to drive the standards through, we always work around the ecosystem to try to essentially develop new customers, new partners, new innovators. And so one of the things that we've done here in India quietly over decades, I mentioned this before in smaller group meetings, we have now 15,000 semiconductor design engineers in India. And if we were to have none, and Minister, if we were to come here and say, by the way, we were announcing that we're going to hire 15,000 engineers, we'd probably be given a parade somewhere. But we've done it quietly over the last couple of decades. And one of the things that does that's critically important that people simply overlook is it helps develop the ecosystem in the universities, okay? In the technology departments, okay, in the electrical engineering and computer science departments, because what makes those departments successful? The same is true in San Diego at UCSD. What makes UCSD successful as an engineering school? Well, when they graduate their engineers, they go into jobs. That's what makes engineering schools successful. So that's part of ecosystem building, is working with universities and hiring from universities and creating private companies that work really well with universities to bring through engineers. And then we do a lot more to continue to develop the ecosystem. Some of the things are somewhat traditional that you've heard about. So we have a venture fund. We invest in startups. Critically important. Why do we invest in startups? We're investing in future customers. We're investing in people that will invent something that will be important to us, and we will start thinking about, well, how do we create technology to make that work even better? And then I started coming up with a list of the other things that we're doing that are not quite that orthodox, in addition to typical venture funds. 100 5G labs. So this is a Government of India project. And so we've jumped in and tried to help develop 5G platforms for these labs in universities around India. In addition to that, 6G fellowships. Essentially awarding fellowships to university professors who want to develop the technology for future 6G. Now, 6G hasn't started. The first working group meeting is going to be March of 2025. But we want to find professors in universities that will develop technology for this. How does this help the ecosystem? It's not just an individual professor who gets a fellowship. It's the students of those professors. It's developing essentially a pull to bring new engineers into working with those professors so that they can move on to be real contributors into 6G and into telecom. Edge AI labs. Indian engineers who are developing AI applications need platforms. And so we're giving them platforms, not for massive data centers, but platforms for edge AI devices, battery-powered devices, different types of use cases, and so we provide those labs as well. In addition, we're investing in women. We have essentially a special dedicated group that looks for women engineers and women entrepreneurs, and we try to cultivate that as well. Design in India Challenge. Every year we set up a challenge for startups to come and bring new innovation in the 5G space that basically is something so good that they're going to win prize money to do it. But in addition to giving them prize money, we help them understand how to bring the product to market. And in addition to that, we help them understand how to go get patents so that they can start to create their own full understanding of how to build an innovative company.
So I want to get back to the talent and skill development, but I know we're running out of time. Sachin, I want
I'll stop the list.
to bring you in for a second, because I think when people are talking over here a lot about AI, they hear a lot about ChatGPT. They think about something that's a little more ephemeral, but none of this happens without real infrastructure. So digital infrastructure is real infrastructure. You invest capital in the ground for all kinds of infrastructure. Tell us a little bit about that and what you would like to see more from the government to accelerate some of that infrastructure.
Sure. And thanks, Nikhil, and thank you, Honorable Minister, for your time. So I think what you have in India is a great wireless infrastructure ecosystem. So you have the second largest wireless network in the world after China, and you have a very competitive kind of retail operator universe between Jio and Airtel. I think innovation is driven by the carriers on the wireless side, and so what I think, as an investor in the space, what we would like to see is a more competitive M&O market, and I think a market as large as India can support 3, if not 4, nationwide 5G networks. I think, as we've talked about on this panel, all of these networks really are a means to an end. So the business is not the business of selling bits or data or text messages or phone calls. It's actually all the services on top. And so how do you compete? You compete based on the quality of your network. The wireline or the fiber network in the country still needs significant investment. And it's a lot of the basic construction roadblocks that continue to be challenges here. So ability to get right of ways, ability to get permits, ability to get appropriate titles, that continues to be a challenge, but not an insurmountable challenge. And then ultimately, I think the data center demand is likely to triple over the next 6 years. And so let's say half of that will be built by the hyperscalers themselves, but half of that will be built by independent operators such as ourselves. And again, there it's access to power, access to land, access to fiber. There are a lot of issues in kind of getting all of those things to come together, particularly for foreign investors. But I think what we've seen is a lot of collaboration with both state and the central government in trying to enable capital to come in and speed up the process of building things.
Well, you bring capital, which is a really important part of this. I spent 9 years running a television network, so I know the importance of keeping time. But Minister, I don't want to end without giving you the last word on a couple of points. One, if you could talk a little bit about, we've talked a lot today about education and talent development, and how India needs to keep, and everyone talks about the great talent pool in India, but we all know through other life cycles, you've got to keep that refreshed. You've got to keep that moving. And secondly, we've talked a lot about telecom, but you also have the Northeast portfolio in your remit, which seems to be an area which I'm sure could go for near and dear to my heart since I was born there. More investment and what other non-Indian companies and Indian companies can do together to accelerate investment in that area.
So Nikhil, I'll come to your last question at the end, but I just want to cover some of the points that have been covered in our interaction today. I think more and more telecom is going to develop in the world as really a carriageway on which you put a lot of content. And I think what the manufacturing revolution did to the world 30, 40, 50 years ago, I think the AI revolution and IoT and machine learning is going to do to the world in the next 10 to 15 years. The real value accretion is going to not come from manufacturing, but really from AI and ML and IoT and all of that sort of stuff. So that's what India has to position itself for. Now, if you agree with that fundamental premise, then you need to do two things. You need to first create the carriageway. And when you need to create the carriageway, you need to have telecom equipment manufacturing happen in India. And the big step that the government has done to be able to do that is put in place a PLI, a productivity-linked incentive scheme. We've had close to 3,500 crores worth of investment in the last 2 years, which is about close to $500 million or so. And we've done production of 50,000 crores, which is close to about $6 billion. And along with that $6 billion, you've had employment of close to 1.5 million people across the length and breadth of this country, exports of 11,500 crores. So the ecosystem that we're talking about, yes, a very firm planted ecosystem needs to be put in place. Auto, civil aviation, telecom need ecosystems. There has to be an anchor tenant that comes in, and then the OEMs will have their ancillaries around. That's why Government of India is thinking of a telecom manufacturing zone, where we actually set up those anchor tenants and the ancillaries around, like auto and like civil aviation. The second point that I'd like to make is we need to also, as we forward integrate from equipment, carriageway into software, we need to vertically backward integrate as well. So we're getting into chips, which gets into your point, Nikhil. The first fab that's going to be set up in India is going to be set up in Assam, in the northeast. It's going to be 40,000 crores worth of investment that goes directly into the northeast. And that's going to be a huge anchor tenant for India, which is going to be the Tata group, which is going to invest there. Second, to the point that Sachin made, right away is now history, Sachin. I think you need to up your game a little bit. The Telecom Act that we introduced in Parliament in December of last year has inserted the right of way law, made it as part of law, which means that Nikhil's state and my state and Sachin's state cannot have their own variant laws for right of way. All of them have to adhere to the central law. It's already been adopted out of 36 states and union territories by close to 29. And so that system, which was a big problem, not only for foreign investors, but people who wanted to lay OFC, has now become, or will become very soon, a thing of the past. The Bharat Net program, which is again another point that Sachin made, is going to invest close to about $7 to $8 billion in laying out OFC in our country. We've laid out close to 700,000 running route kilometers of OFC over the last 6 to 7 years. And we're going to connect every single Gram Panchayat, which is a conglomeration of villages in one head. We have 650,000 villages in India, roughly about 200,000 Gram Panchayats. We'll be connecting every single Gram Panchayat with OFC fiber across the country, from where an entrepreneur will then connect from the ONT directly to consumers, providing FTTH. So you're going to have a broadband fiber that's in place. You'll have a 4G saturation that's in place. Out of the 650,000 villages in India, 622 today have 4G and 5G coverage. The balance 30,000 villages will have full coverage by May next year. And this is my commitment to you, with a $5 billion pipeline. So the carriageway is going to be complete. We're working on backward integration with the fab. We're working on forward integration with an ecosystem, with an anchor tenant in place. And then we want the great leap forward, which is through AI, IoT, machine learning, and all of that, which will provide tremendous value for the country going forward.
Right. Well, with that, we'll wrap up, Mr. Minister. Thank you so much for your comments, and Sachin and Alex, a very insightful panel, and it's
And just
wonderful
to
to
end,
see everything's
India has followed the world on 4G. We have marched with the world on 5G. And I promise you, with Bharat 6G Alliance, we will lead the world in 6G.
Great. Thanks.